before sunrise, Kentucky's calm was shattered. Engines roared through the fog. Helicopters thundered low over rooftops as agents in tactical vests surged down narrow streets. What seemed like another quiet morning in America's heartland became the front line of a war once thought to belong only to the border. But how did the Mexican Sinaloa Cartel dig so deep into the very soil of the United States, and why did no one see it coming? As dawn broke, the coordinated ICE and DEA operation hit 30 targets across Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. The raids were swift, simultaneous, and surgical, the largest narcotics enforcement action in the region's history. 51 suspects fell within hours, all tied to one of Mexico's most powerful cartels. Federal sources told Reuters and The Guardian that the operation had been under surveillance for 18 months. It wasn't a random sweep, it was a decapitation strike on a hidden empire. Agents discovered 133 firearms, $78,000 in cash, and nearly $9,000 counterfeit pills, much of it fentanyl-laced deadly doses intended for small-town America. Behind the statistics lay a disturbing truth: cartel logistics had evolved. No longer reliant on risky border crossings, traffickers built distribution pipelines within the U.S. camouflaged as freight companies and agricultural suppliers. Louisville became their hub, Lexington their storage ground, Charleston their money route. Strategically, this operation signals a shift in American counter-narcotics doctrine. Under President Donald Trump's renewed Homeland Enforcement Directive, intelligence agencies now view inland cartel cells as national security threats, not just criminal syndicates. The DEA's Louisville Field Division coordinated with DHS and ICE cyber operations using predictive analytics software originally designed for counterterrorism to identify cartel supply nodes in the Midwest. The objective: to cut the logistical veins before the poison reached the bloodstream of rural America. The implications stretch beyond U.S. borders. The precision and coordination echo Europe's own fight against synthetic drug corridors in Ukraine's war-torn east, where trafficking networks exploit chaos to push amphetamines westward. In the Middle East, Israel's security services battle Iranian proxies using identical tactics: encrypted communications, dummy shipments, shadow logistics. Meanwhile, Beijing's control over chemical precursor exports to Mexico remains under scrutiny, with DW reporting this month that U.S.-China tensions over fentanyl production have intensified following new American sanctions on Chinese suppliers. Yet for every headline about geopolitics, the human toll in America's interior is staggering. In Kentucky alone, more than 2,000 people died from overdoses last year. Each bag of powder seized represents dozens of lives spared, but also a haunting question: how many more shipments slipped through unseen families across Appalachia now bury sons and daughters lost not to gunfire or war, but to a pill manufactured thousands of miles away? The battle lines have shifted. The front is no longer the border wall or the desert. It's the neighborhood, the warehouse, the delivery van idling behind a diner at 4 a.m. If cartels can operate here in the land between rivers and cornfields, what remains of America's promise of safety within its own walls? It began with a single gunshot. February 2024, Louisville, Kentucky. Police responded to a late-night shooting on Linden Avenue. One man lay bleeding on the sidewalk, the air thick with gunpowder and panic. What seemed like another street dispute would soon unravel one of the most intricate cartel networks ever found in the American interior. How could a single bullet expose a system powerful enough to rival multinational corporations? Inside the small home where the shots rang out, detectives uncovered something extraordinary. Not just weapons and cash, but ledgers written in Spanish coded with roots, initials, and quantities. Each page told a story of movement cocaine, from Sinaloa meth, from Sonora money, routed through Kentucky banks to offshore accounts. 4 men were arrested that night, all Mexican nationals later tied to the Sinaloa Cartel's logistics division. That single raid became the thread that unraveled an empire. As Reuters confirmed ballistic tests on 2 of the 43 firearms recovered, linked them to a 2022 homicide and a 2021 officer-involved shooting, proof that cartel firepower had been active for years in the region. Louisville's narcotics division quickly partnered with the DEA and ICE Homeland Security investigations, tracing the weapons to import routes disguised as agricultural freight. Within weeks, the investigation ballooned into a tri-state operation involving federal marshals and local sheriffs from Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Strategically, what unfolded revealed the evolution of modern narco warfare inside US borders. Gone are the chaotic shootouts of 1980s Miami or the crude smuggling tunnels of Arizona. Today's cartels operate with surgical precision. They use digital logistics platforms, encrypted payments, and legitimate business fronts to mask their trade. Investigators told BBC News that the network discovered in Kentucky mirrored the corporate structure of legitimate supply chains, distributors, regional managers, couriers, and accountants. A multinational enterprise fueled by death run with efficiency. International parallels are chilling. In Ukraine, Western analysts have observed how Russian-backed criminal syndicates exploit the fog of war to smuggle narcotics and weapons across Eastern Europe, a reminder that chaos breeds opportunity. In Iran, the Revolutionary Guard's smuggling routes through the Persian Gulf show similar complexity, with state-linked actors laundering profits through cryptocurrency exchanges in Dubai and Shanghai. And in Asia, tensions between the US and China over fentanyl precursor exports have deepened, with Beijing accused of turning a blind eye to the chemical plants feeding cartels like Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation. But for Kentucky's communities, these global threads feel devastatingly personal. Families across Louisville, Bowling Green, and Pikeville now recognize faces from the nightly news, neighbor shop owners, truck drivers, all arrested for helping transport or store narcotics. Addiction rates spiked 300% between 2020 and 2024. Local hospitals ran out of overdose medication. Police chiefs described small towns where dealers operate within sight of schools, using teenagers as lookouts for cartel couriers. In a region where faith, family, and freedom define identity, the idea that a foreign criminal enterprise could control local life feels like a betrayal of America's sovereignty itself. Federal officials say the Louisville shooting was the wake-up call the nation needed. Yet the deeper question remains: how many other small American towns hide the same quiet infiltration, waiting for one more gunshot to bring it to light? Picture a warehouse in rural Kentucky. On the surface, it stores tools, tires, and freight containers. But beneath the floorboards, hidden compartments, chemical residue ledgers, and Spanish and GPS trackers still blinking. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. How did the Sinaloa Cartel transform the American supply chain into its own smuggling architecture? By mid-2024, investigators had their answer. The DEA and ICE uncovered a system so refined it could rival Amazon's logistics model. According to Reuters and defense news traffickers, disguised drug shipments as legitimate freight, complete with digital manifests, tracking codes, and custom-style invoices. Each truck carried both contraband and real goods, creating a camouflage impossible to spot without intelligence intercepts. Couriers were trained to act like freight drivers, their routes pre-mapped through highways least likely to attract inspection. These shipments traveled from Sinaloa through Texas, passed silently across Tennessee, and broke down into smaller consignments once inside Kentucky. The meth, cocaine, and fentanyl were then distributed to local contacts, who often didn't realize they were working for an international syndicate. Every delivery left a digital trace, one that eventually helped investigators map the entire infrastructure from Mexico to the Appalachian Hills. The cartel's corporate structure included supervisors, dispatchers, and a financial team managing crypto transactions and U.S. bank accounts. Strategically, this marked a seismic evolution in organized crime. Under President Donald Trump's administration, the Department of Homeland Security identified cartel logistics as a national security threat comparable to cyber terrorism. Intelligence analysts told The Guardian that this shift represents the industrialization of drug trafficking, no longer smuggling, but mass production and optimized distribution. Each hub inside the U.S. acted as a domestic port of entry, bypassing traditional border interdictions. Globally, the same pattern repeats. In Ukraine, both sides of the ongoing war have seen organized networks exploiting chaos to move narcotics and weapons through Europe's war corridors. In the Middle East, Israeli intelligence recently intercepted Iranian proxy shipments containing both arms and synthetic opioids meant for black market funding, a hybrid economy of war and addiction. In East Asia, DW reports that the surge of fentanyl precursor exports from China remains the ghost economy of the Pacific, fueling an invisible conflict between American sanctions and Chinese manufacturers. But the human story beneath this network is brutal. In communities across the Midwest, addiction has rewritten family histories. Overdose hotlines never sleep. Churches run night shelters for those trying to break dependency. Coroners in West Virginia say they no longer have space in county morgues during peak weeks. In 1 year alone, 400 Kentuckians died from synthetic narcotics, each death connected by a line that begins thousands of miles away in cartel-run laboratories. And yet, with every seizure seizure, the logistics adapt. Every closed highway spawns a new backroad route. Every dismantled courier is replaced by an algorithm rerouting shipments through smaller towns. It's a war fought with data, not just drugs. The efficiency of globalization, the same system that delivers food and medicine, now serves as the skeleton of narcotics trade. So as America fortifies its borders and expands cyber intelligence, one question cuts deeper than any headline. If the cartels can out-organize entire nations, what happens when crime itself becomes a business model that no democracy can fully dismantle? When agents breached the doors of cartel stash houses, what they found stunned even veteran investigators. Walls lined with assault rifles, ammunition drums stacked beside duffel bags of methamphetamine, tactical vests hanging next to bundles of counterfeit pills, small blue tablets stamped to look like OxyContin, but each carrying a lethal dose of fentanyl. Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia all revealed the same dark reality the border war had quietly migrated into America's heartland. The seizure list reads like an armory inventory. 133 firearms, including AR-15 rifles and modified handguns capable of automatic fire, some traced to crimes as far back as 2021. According to Reuters and Jane's Defense Weekly, several of these weapons originated from U.S. dealers legally sold and later trafficked south before re-entering the country through reverse smuggling, a grim cycle of American firepower funding its own destruction. In strategic terms, analysts see this as more than a criminal trend, it's a form of hybrid warfare. The same supply chain that moves narcotics now doubles as a weapons corridor, blurring the lines between drug cartels and paramilitary groups. The Sinaloa network's use of encrypted radios, night vision equipment, and drones mirrors tactics seen in conflict zones from Ukraine to the Middle East. A DW Defense report this month described how non-state actors in both regions increasingly use civilian-grade combat kits, a term that now applies disturbingly well to US-based cartel cells. But what truly magnifies this crisis is not the guns, it's the demand they protect. Kentucky's addiction epidemic remains one of the worst in America. Federal data show that more than 2.5% of residents over the age of 12 struggle with opioid dependency, higher than the national average. Between 2022 and 2024, over 4,000 overdose deaths were recorded across the 3 states. Each statistic hides a personal tragedy: parents losing children, siblings fading to addiction communities, watching futures dissolve pill by pill. Medical experts tell The Guardian that the modern cartel no longer sells just drugs, it sells engineered addiction. Fentanyl and high-purity methamphetamine are chemically optimized for longer highs and deeper dependency. Each batch refined in Mexican super labs carries the precision of a pharmaceutical factory. This is not chaos, it's design, and the victims are not just users, they are consumers trapped in a deadly subscription model. Globally, the parallels are striking. In war-torn Ukraine, methamphetamine labs thrive in shadow economies. In Iran, the state battles its own addiction wave fueled by cross-border narcotics trade. In China, chemical plants supplying precursors remain a flashpoint in ongoing US-China diplomatic friction. What ties these crises together is the weaponization of addiction, a tool that erodes nations from within. Yet amid the devastation, the human will to resist endures. In small Kentucky towns, church basements have become rehab centers. Veterans volunteer as recovery mentors. Emergency medics carry naloxone on every call, saving lives one breath at a time. Behind every rescue is quiet defiance, a refusal to let cartels decide who lives and dies in America's forgotten corners. Still, as the drugs grow deadlier and the logistics more advanced, the fight becomes less about arresting dealers and more about reclaiming sovereignty. Can a nation truly secure its borders if its people remain prisoners to a chemical empire operating within? The war no longer rages only on highways or in safe houses. It has migrated into the invisible world of screens, servers, and cryptocurrency wallets. The Sinaloa Cartel has adapted faster than anyone expected, not by force, but through code. The same operation that seized guns and narcotics in Kentucky also unearthed the cartel's digital skeleton, encrypted chat rooms, crypto accounts, and payment ledgers hidden behind blockchain obfuscation. In this new war, the weapon is encryption and the battlefield is data. As Reuters confirmed in late 2025, U.S. federal agents now trace over $400 million in suspected laundering through digital currencies linked to cartel wallets. Using software originally designed for counterterrorism financing, the DEA and ICE have built Sentinel-Net, a real-time analytics network that monitors crypto transactions across platforms. A DHS official told The Guardian that the cartel's digital operations mirror the sophistication of mid-level state actors. Every shipment, every courier, every payment is is now a point in a network that learns and adapts like artificial intelligence. Under President Donald Trump's new Homeland Digital Security Initiative, these networks are being targeted as domestic infiltration systems, a classification that grants counterintelligence powers previously reserved for foreign threats. Analysts at DW and Defense News describe it as America's first attempt to treat cartels not merely as criminals, but as cyber-enabled insurgencies. The strategy shifts from raids and arrests to interception and disruption, digital strikes against money flows that sustain narco infrastructure. Globally, this evolution mirrors larger security conflicts. In Ukraine, drones and cyber attacks blend with conventional warfare, proving that dominance in the data realm determines power on the ground. In the Middle East, Israeli intelligence faces Iranian-backed cyber smuggling networks moving weapons and synthetic drugs simultaneously. And across the Pacific, US-China tensions intensify as Washington accuses Chinese companies of laundering cartel profits through shadow cryptocurrency markets. The battlegrounds differ, but the pattern is the same. Technology has turned every conflict into a digital chess match. The consequences for America's domestic stability are profound. Local law enforcement now faces an enemy they can't see or chase. Rural sheriffs find their towns transformed into digital nodes of global crime data points in a trillion-dollar trade that feeds on secrecy. ICE analysts describe cartels using AI-generated deepfake profiles to rent warehouses, open freight accounts, and even bypass know-your-customer checks at major crypto exchanges. But beyond the screens and encryption keys lies the human cost. In Louisville, a mother who lost her son to a fentanyl overdose still receives text scams offering pain relief pills, messages sent by bots hosted on foreign servers. Addiction has gone digital, targeting victims with precision advertising disguised as online deals. Technology, once the promise of freedom, has become the pipeline of dependency. Federal officials insist the US is fighting back, deploying cyberstrike teams, freezing crypto wallets, and dismantling online black markets. Yet experts warn that technology is neutral. The next cartel doesn't need guns or smuggling routes, only data and algorithms. As America hardens its cyber walls, one question looms larger than any firewall: can a nation protect its soul when the war for control is waged in code, not combat? The raid in Kentucky was not the end, it was the beginning of a new realization. The front line of America's drug war no longer lies at the southern border. It runs through its small towns, freight hubs, and digital networks. The heartland has become the new front line where the promise of safety collides with the reality of a globalized, invisible enemy. The silence of rural fields now hides a war fought in algorithms, couriers, and chemical formulas. How does a superpower defend itself when the invasion is already inside? Federal agents describe the Kentucky operation as a strategic awakening. ICE, DEA, and the Department of Justice have now formed a permanent tri-agency task force, a hybrid between intelligence unit and rapid response command. The mission is clear: track the cartel's inland expansion in real time, from crypto wallets to truck routes. Officials told Reuters that this task force employs predictive policing software once reserved for counterterrorism in the Middle East. The American homeland has become both the laboratory and the battleground of modern enforcement. Yet this victory came at a cost. The Guardian reports that within weeks of the Kentucky bus cartel cells reactivated in Ohio and North Carolina, proof of resilience. The network regenerates faster than it can be dismantled. For every node erased, another emerges. Experts compare it to insurgent warfare decentralization as survival. A DW analyst warned that unless Washington integrates social policy with security measures, rehabilitation with interdiction, America risks fighting shadows while losing citizens. On a global scale, this mirrors the geopolitical chessboard of 2025. In Ukraine, Russia's hybrid warfare blends economics, propaganda, and cyber infiltration to destabilize adversaries from within. In the Middle East, Israel and Iran continue a silent struggle where smuggling routes, militias, and digital espionage overlap. Across the Pacific, US-China competition extends beyond trade into data dominance and chemical regulation. The Kentucky operation in its microcosm reflects a broader truth. Every great power is now fighting an internal war against invisible systems that ignore borders and governments alike. But beyond intelligence reports and international parallels lies a more human question: what happens to the people caught in between? In Kentucky, families are rebuilding trust. Churches have become crisis centers. Veterans volunteer for recovery missions, rescuing addicts before cartels reclaim them. There are stories of redemption of communities refusing to let despair define them, yet many know the reprieve is temporary. The drugs will return, perhaps stronger, cheaper, and more lethal. Still, the Kentucky raid stands as proof that America can fight back if it evolves as fast as its enemies. Security is no longer about walls or patrols, but awareness, technology, and willpower. The cartels learned globalization before governments did. Now it is the state's turn to learn resilience. The DEA's final statement after the operation summed it up best. This is not a border fight, it's a fight for the heartland. The question is no longer whether America can stop the flow, but whether it can reclaim control over its own veins, its own towns, its own people. Can a nation win a war that has already crossed every border it ever built? The ICE and DEA raid across Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia exposed the Sinaloa Cartel's deep infiltration of the American interior. 51 arrests, 133 firearms, and 9,000 counterfeit pills seized in what officials call the largest narcotics operation in the region's history. What began with the Louisville shooting evolved into a multi-state crackdown revealing a corporate-style logistics empire, complete with fake manifests, cryptocurrency laundering, and encrypted communications. The operation under President Donald Trump's Homeland Enforcement Directive marks a transformation in America's war on drugs, from physical borders to digital front lines. Globally, the same dynamics echo through Ukraine's war zones, Iran's smuggling corridors, and China's chemical supply chain. The Kentucky case symbolizes a universal truth that crime and conflict now share infrastructure. As addiction devastates local families and technology empowers transnational cartels, America faces a choice: adapt or succumb. This isn't just a battle for security, it's a test of national resilience. Can the world's most powerful nation outthink an enemy that hides inside its own system?